Hey everybody, we're going to be talking about reports. Now, reports are going to be very important for evaluating the performance of your properties. You also use them kind of in a review process to make sure that nothing looks weird and out of place, so accuracy as well. And then a lot of times, if you do any type of financing, banking institutions are going to need it for, financing new projects, or a lot of times they need to update their records on a quarterly or annually basis and will request your financials from you as well. So reports, the integrity, the accuracy of your reports are very important. And there are some standard reports we're going to take a look at that I like to use for property management. So let's go on and get started here. Let's jump over to our reports tab. And what it is going to bring you to is a list of all the reports that are available in QuickBooks. Now, we went into some of this in the setup section, so I won't get into the various areas here, but what I will do is talk about the reports we use for property management. So these stars on the right are to mark it as one of your favorites. So the reports I like to look at, let's see here, we have a balance sheet. I have a profit and loss. That's detail. I like to see accounts receivable aging summary. I like to see an accounts payable aging summary. Okay, so those are the four main ones. Your profit and loss, which is your income and expenses, your net income. Your balance sheet, which is how much money you have and the different liability accounts, your balances there. Your accounts receivable, which is basically your tenant delinquency, and the accounts payable, which are people that you owe. Now, when I marked those green, what it did was it brought it up here to the favorites. Now, what I like to do is, if you go into these reports, it'll pull up, the report itself. Actually, that's not the one I want to use. Just normal profit and loss. There it is. Okay, so when you go into the reports, what it's going to do is it's going to come and it's going to give you a standard set of criteria. So in this criteria here, you can manually put the date ranges that you want in, or there are some preset parameters here that you can use. So like this was set to last month, so it pulled last month. If you did this month, it'll pull this month. And then once you make your changes and want to run it, hit run, and it'll pull the activity for that period. You can display the information in different ways. Like right now, we just have the totals, but there's a lot of different ways you can display this by class, by tenants, by years, quarters, months, whatever it ends up being. This is some options just basically on how you want to see the formatting of the report. And then if you want to compare it to another period, you can compare it to another period. In some cases, I like to look at percentage of income because it'll kind of tell me if I'm out of line on certain things. But I generally look at that with more of my business stuff as opposed to the properties, but it can be useful. And then we have cash and accrual. So you can change this accounting method, the reporting between cash and accrual. Now, most of you are going to be operating on a cash basis. And what a cash basis basically means is that income is not going to be recorded until you receive that cash and deposit it, and expenses are not going to be recorded until you actually pay for the expenses. Now, the accrual, the income is recorded when the charge is created, like the rent charge on the invoices. When you charge $1,000 in rent to the tenant, regardless of whether or not you've received it, your income statement is going to show that you made $1,000. And then the expense will be reflected when you receive the bill, when it's generated, not when you pay it. So if you get that Drain King invoice for $125, it's going to show an expense of $125, regardless of not whether you paid it. So that's the primary difference between cash and accrual. Cash is income and is received. When it's received, it's recorded. When expenses are paid, it's recorded. And then accrual, when income is generated, it's recorded. And when the expense is generated, it's recorded. So important to know. For our purposes, I'm going to be on accrual because this is basically a shell account company, and I have no cash transactions. I haven't really received any cash, and I haven't really put any out. Some of the transactions are there, but I want you to see a full picture, so I look at accrual. So next thing we're going to do here, go back here, is I want to customize these reports. It's fine that you're your favorites, but really then once you do this every time, it's going to default to this certain type of way, and you're going to have to make all these changes to get what you want out of it. Plus, there's one other report I want that is not reflected in our favorites list. So the first report I want to look at is a profit and loss. And again, this is going to be an income statement, all your income coming in, all your expenses going out, and a net income for the month. Let's just pull some activity here. So overall in September we had 0 income, which means 0 gross profit, but we did have some expenses recorded, which means our net operating income was negative $421. Now we did have this weird little adjustment that we went through in the reconciliation area, which throws our numbers off some, but that is typically what you're going to see. That's what you're looking at as your net operating income. For me, though, I would like to see 12 months worth of activity so that I can compare what happens month to month and try to recognize any trends, any dips in income, any spikes in expenses, all of those things. Plus, I like to just see how my portfolio is doing overall, kind of year to date. So in order to do this, we are going to change this to this year, and I like 1/1 through 12/31. I like to see all the dates. The display columns, I want to change this to monthly. I'll just show you what that looks like real quick. And then what that is going to do, I'm going to leave these others alone, and I want to leave it on accrual. And what that is going to do is it's going to show the entire portfolio month by month. Here's the income I've received every single month for all of the properties. Here's my total income. Here's all the expenses. And here's my net income for every single month. And then I want to save this. So I'm going to change the name on this first off to an income statement. It's just my little hang up. Now, if you want to create a group to add this to, like you can create, you can do that. So there's month-end reports. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to save. And then when we go back to our reports area, under custom reports, it is now going to have our income statement. And I'm actually going to edit that a little bit more. So now I know this is my 12-month income statement. So this is my portfolio for the year, month by month. Now, I also do like to see only 1 month. And I know this seems a little bit redundant, and maybe it's just a personal thing, but I think it has some value. So I want to make sure that this next profit and loss, this next income statement that we set up, is always going to pull for the current month. And then we only want the total here, and we're going to have the accrual. Let's make sure this pulls right. And then September, if you want to, you can also change the description's right on the invoice too, and it'll save that, which I do happen to do, but that's really, again, a personal preference. So this report's pulling the way I want it to, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, and I'm just going to put monthly income statement, and I'll add it to our group. You don't have to use groups. I mean, it's going to show up in the same place. The only advantage to that is if you have maybe a couple different entities and you want to set up different reports for different entities, you can change the groups and, by whatever entity. That's one way you could potentially use that. Now you see we have our 12-month income statement or our monthly income statement. And what's going to happen is when we pull this up, it's going to keep all of those sayings. It's going to be the current month. And if this is October, it'd pull October activity. And it's going to have my income statements still the same here. Everything's going to stay the same. It's just going to pull the numbers for whatever period we're on. Same with the 12-month. Everything's going to pull the way that I set it up to pull. Okay, a couple other reports I want to get done here is I do want my balance sheet. This is a balance sheet detail. I don't like that report either. So that's no problem. You just come here, undo that, balance sheet summary. Now let's just do a balance sheet, regular balance sheet. And then I want to make sure that this is pulling for the current month. So this month, it's accrual, total only. I don't really mess with these a whole bunch. Balance sheet, everything looks the way I want it to look. And then I'm going to save this customization, balance sheet. I'm going to add it to my month end and save. Let's go look here at our receivables. And I want it as of today. So that's going to be the most up-to-date period. So anytime I pull this, whatever date it is, it's going to pull for that current date. Let's see here, active rows and columns, report as of report date, 30-day aging period, 4 periods. So you can change the aging periods, and you could change how many are on there and so forth through that. Now, one thing I like to do here is this is technically an AR aging summary. But I like to rename things the way that I'm kind of used to seeing them in the property management world. So tenant delinquency. And then we're going to save this customization, tenant delinquency, month-end reports. Go back to the report list, and then AP aging as of today. That all looks good. 4 periods, 30. That's the way I like to see it. I'm going to save this as well. Okay, so now what you have is you have your 5 main reports, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the only report that's really kind of missing from here is a rent roll. And what I will do in this section is I will leave an Excel version of a rent roll that you can use, and I'll do a video on how to complete it and how to use that you can include, because a banking institution will want to see a rent roll, and the QuickBooks isn't set up for a rent roll. I've seen people try to finagle one together, but it's really it's not a good way to prepare a rent roll within QuickBooks. So that'll be kind of an outlier on this, but for the most part, these reports are exactly what we want to see. So again, our 12-month income statement is going to be our income and expenses for the year. Now, the next thing I want to show you here is this is for the whole portfolio. So this is basically all the activity. Now, if you only have one property, great. But if you have multiple properties, this is great. But what if you need to see what it looks like for an individual property? So what we can do here is we can go to Customize, and let's see here under Filter, I believe it is. Yep. We can either filter this by the tenant, which again, depending on how you're doing this, if you're using your property set up this way, you can go through and select your property. Let's see what 123 Any Street says. All you do is select tenant and run report. And then you can have your profit and loss for 123 Any Street. Now let me show you another little trick if you want to take the time to do this. You can then save this Street. Let's just create a new group. Again, this is just so we can kind of see all the different ways we can do this. So now we have an income statement that is sorted by the expenses that are tagged and labeled to the 123 any street property. And instead of seeing our whole portfolio, now we can see the rent is $795 for January, all the expenses paid, and our net income. And if we had more activity, it'd go through the year. And then if you go back to your reports and custom, you can now see that we have a column for our individual properties, and you can create reports just for your individual properties as well. This would be your portfolio-based reports, and then you can create for any property that you want. So if you find yourself looking at a certain property or a certain report for a property over and over and over and over again, create an individual report and save it as a customization, because you can go in, you won't have to go through all of this, and it's fine if it's just one or two things that you have to do. But when you start getting 3, 4, 5 properties, believe me, going in there and making all these clicks and all these adjustments, it gets to be a pain. So that's one way we can sort this 12-month income statement. Let's look at a regular monthly income statement for a different property in a different way. So what we're going to do here is this is our income statement for this month, and there's not much activity here. So we may not get anything, but if you then wanted to filter by class, if you're using classes, up here, then you can go down here and you can select the property that you want to see. I don't think there's a little bit of activity here. So we have a drain cleaning invoice in the month of September for that property. And again, if you wanted to change this to 7619 and save it as an individual property account, property report, you can do that as well. Now, one of the things that is kind of a little bit of a pain is that you can't really batch these reports. So by that, I mean you can't select, you want to see this report for these 5 properties and have 5 individual reports pop up. If you try to select multiple properties, all that really does is it merges all the activity for all those properties into this report. So keep that in mind. Okay, now one thing you can do with your profit and loss, if you want to see your property side by side, although we can't batch print multiple reports at once, what we can do is we're going to go down here to the monthly income statement. And here we have the income statement. Again, it pulls for the current month as we have it set up. But what we can do here is we can display the columns rather than the total amount. We can display them by classes. Earn report. So what this does is it displays all of the properties that you have set up as classes. Of course, we only have one address with activity set up as a class, but this non-specified are all the transactions that are not associated with a class. So this is another thing you can do to check and make sure that everything is linked to where it's supposed to be. So like our office supplies wouldn't be typically associated with a property. Bank fees not typically associated with a property. Now that's if you have more than one property. If you only have one property, then link these to the property, and you're good to go there. So that's one way to do it. And as you can see, as you get down here into your net income, it has a net income for the property for that month. Now, this is one of the benefits of working with classes, because this doesn't work so well when you try to display columns by tenants, which is the other way we can set up our properties and our tenants. And the reason being, let me get a full year's worth of. Okay, and the reason being is because not only do we have our properties set up as tenants so we can keep track of everything, but then we also have, the tenants or subtenants. So it actually pulls them all and it makes us a very messy report here. So this doesn't work near as well if you're not going to use class to set up the properties. Okay, that is what I have for reports in terms of how they can help you manage, and you can set this up and manage them, use them for management of your properties. Again, feel free to look through some of these reports. I mean, there's a lot of clever ways that these reports are presented here. And again, you see, you can filter for any of this stuff, but these are kind of like preset reports, and maybe you see something that you like a lot better than the reports that I've personally picked out and chosen. And the reason I like these is because of what I'm used to utilizing a property management software all those years. So it's not the only way. There could be better ways out there. It's just what I know and what I'm comfortable with and how I know how to maneuver around them. So feel free to look through all of this stuff. They may be reflecting information in a way that's a lot more useful for you, and there's a lot of them here.